Chapter 1. Our Desire to Bond. It is beyond our imagination to conceive of a single form of life that exists alone and independent, unattached to other forms. Lewis Thompson. If you're a survivor of multiple failed relationships, you may wonder why you keep trying. I can assure you that you don't persist just for the sometimes short-lived good times, and you don't persist because of TV ads featuring loving couples on tropical islands. You persist despite your track record and despite dismal divorce statistics because you are designed to bond. Human beings are not meant to live alone. There is a fundamental biological imperative that propels you and every organism on this planet to be in community, to be in relationships with other organisms, whether you're thinking about it consciously or not. Your biology pushes you to bond. In fact, the coming together of individuals in community, starting with two, is a principal force that drives biological evolution, a phenomenon I call spontaneous evolution, which I cover in depth in the book of the same name. There are, of course, additional biological imperatives designed to ensure individual and species survival: the drive for food, for sex, for growth, for protection, and the ferocious, implicable drive to fight for life. We don't know where or how the will to live is programmed into cells, but it is a fact that no organism will readily give up its life. Try to kill the most primitive of organisms, and the bacterium doesn't say, "Okay, I'll wait until you kill me." Instead, it will make every evasive maneuver in its power to sustain its survival. When our biological drives are not being fulfilled, when our survival is threatened, we get a feeling in the pit of our stomach that sometimes is wrong even before our conscious minds comprehend the danger. That gut feeling is being felt globally right now. Many of us are feeling the pit in our stomach as we ponder the survivability of our environmentally damaged planet and of the human beings who have damaged it. Most of this book focuses on how individuals can create or rekindle wonderful relationships. But it is the final chapter I'll explain how the energy created by heaven on earth relationships can heal the planet and save our species. That's a tall order. I know, but we have to hand an extremely successful model for creating healing relationships, and will ultimately lead to the healing of our planet. As the ancient mystics have said, the answer lies within. The nature and power of harmonious relationships can be seen in the community of the trillions of cells that cooperate to form every human being. This might at first seem strange to you, because when you look in the mirror, you might logically conclude that you are a single entity. But that is a major misconception. A human being is exactly a community made up of 50 trillion sentient cells within a skin-covered petri dish. A surprising insight I'll further in chapter 3. As a cell biologist, I spent many hours happily studying the behavior and the fate of stem cells in plastic cultural dishes. The trillions of cells within each skin-colored human body live far more harmoniously than feuding couples and strife-ridden human communities. This is one excellent reason why we can learn valuable insight from them. 50 trillion sentient cells, 50 trillion citizens living together peacefully in a remarkably complex community. All the cells have jobs. All the cells have health care, protection, and a viable economy based on exchange of ATP molecules, units of energy biologists often refer to as the coin of the realm. In comparison, humanity's job figuring out the logistics of how a relatively measly 7 billion humans can work together in harmony looks easy. And compared to the 50 trillion celled cooperative human community, each couple's job figuring out how two human beings can communicate and work together in harmony seems like a piece of cake. Though I know that at times it seems like the hardest challenge we face on Earth. I grant you that single-celled organisms, which were the first life forms on this planet, spent a lot of time, almost 3 billion years, figuring out how to bond with each other. Even I didn't care, even I didn't take that long. And they did start coming together to create multicellular life forms. They initially organized as loose communities or colonies of single-celled organisms. But the evolutionary advantage of living in a community, more awareness of the environment, and a shared workload soon led to highly structured organisms composed of millions, billions, and then trillions of socially interactive single cells. These multicellular communities range in size from the microscopic to those easily seen by the naked eye. A bacterium, an amoeba, an ant, a dog, a human being, and so on. Yes, even bacteria do not live alone. They form dispersed communities that keep in constant communication via chemical signals and viruses. Once cells figure out a way to work together, create organisms on all sizes and shapes, the newly evolved multicellular organism also started to assemble into communities themselves. For example, on the macro level, the aspen tree forms a superorganism made up of large stands of genetically identical trees, technically stems, connected by a single underground root system. The largest known fully connected aspen is a 106-acre grove in Utah nicknamed Pondo that some experts contend is the largest organism in the world. The social nature of harmonious multi-organism societies can provide fundamental insight directly applicable to human civilizations. One great example, an ant, which, like a human, is a multicellular social organism. When you take an ant out of its community, it will die. In fact, an individual ant is really a suborganism. The true organism is actually represented by the ant colony. Lewis Thomas describes ants this way. Ants are so much like human beings as to be an embarrassment. They farm fungi, raise aphids, raise aphids as livestock, launch armies into war, use chemical spray to alarm and confuse enemies, capture slaves, engage in child labor, exchange information ceaselessly. They do everything but watch television. Nature's drive to form communities is also easy to observe in the mammalian species, such as horses. Rambunctious colts run around and irritate their parents just like human children do. To get the colt in line, the parents nip the offspring as a form of negative reinforcement. If those little bites don't work, the parent moves on to the most effective punishment of all. They force the misbehaving colt out of the group and do not let it return to the community. The, that turns out to be the ultimate punishment for even the friskiest, least controllable colt, which will do anything in its behavioral capacity to rejoin the community. As for human communities, we can fend off we can fend for ourselves as individuals longer than a single ant can, but we're likely to go crazy in the process. I am reminded of the movie Castaway, in which Tom Hanks plays a man who is marooned on an island in the South Pacific. He uses his own bloody hand to imprint a face on a Wilson Sporting Goods volleyball he calls Wilson, so he can have someone to talk to. Finally, after 4 years, he makes the risky step of venturing off the island in a makeshift raft because he'd rather die trying to find someone to communicate with than to stay by himself on the island, even though he has figured out how to secure food and drink. That is how to survive. Most people think that the drive to procreate is the most fundamental biological imperative for humans, and there's no doubt that reproduction of the individual is fundamental to species survival. That's why, for most of us, sex is so pleasurable. Nature wanted to ensure that human beings have the desire to procreate and to sustain the species. But Hanks doesn't venture off the island to propagate. He ventures off the island to communicate with someone other than a volleyball. For humans, coming together in pairs, biologists call it pair coupling, is about more than sex for propagation. It is a lecture entitled The Uniqueness of Humans. Neurobiologist and primatologist Robert M. Spolsky explains how unique humans are in this regard. Some of the time, though the challenge is we're dealing with, Some of the time, though the challenge is we're dealing with something where we are simply unique, there is no precedent out there in the animal world. Let me give you an example of this, a shocking one. Okay, you have a couple. They come home at the end of the day. They talk. They eat dinner. They talk. They go to bed. They have sex. They talk some more. They go to sleep. The next day, they do the exact same thing. They come home from work. They talk. They eat. They talk. They go to bed. They have sex. They talk. They fall asleep. They do this every day for 30 days running. A giraffe would be repulsed by this. Hardly anybody out there has non-reproductive sex day after day. Nobody talks about it afterwards. For humans, sex for propagation is crucial until a population stabilizes. When human population reaches a state of balance and security, sex for propagation decreases. In the United States, where most parents expect children to survive and also expect that they themselves won't be out on the streets, with a couple, when they are old, the average number of offspring per family is fewer than 2. However, any population that is threatened will initiate reproduction earlier and reproduce more. They unconsciously do the calculation that some of their children are not going to survive, and that they'll need more than 2 children to share the load of helping to support them when they are old. In India, for example, though the fertility rate dropped 19% in a decade to 2.2, in the poorest areas where families face tremendous challenges to survive, the rate can be 3 times higher. But even in societies where the drive to reproduce is curtailed, there is still an incentive for coupling because the drive to bond trumps the drive to procreate. Couples who do not have children can create wonderful relationships, and many make a conscious decision not to have children. In Two is Enough, A Couple's Guide to Living Childless by Choice, author Sarah S. Scott explores why some forego the experience. Scott starts off the book with a conversation with a friend's husband who was at the time a new dad. I need to just go ahead and stop this for a second. It's 15 minutes, huh?